storm was merciless that night. Icy wind howling through empty streets, snow swallowing every trace of life. Officer Daniel was moments from ending his shift when his headlights caught a flicker of movement in the blizzard. He slammed the brakes. There, half buried in the snow, lay a wounded German shepherd beside a rusted cage, shivering and bleeding. Its eyes, filled with pain but burning with something deeper, locked onto his. Daniel rushed out, ignoring the cold slicing through his uniform. As he knelt beside the trembling animal, the dog tried to crawl toward him, then stopped as if guarding something invisible. "Hang on, buddy," he whispered, wrapping him in his coat. He didn't know it yet, but this was no ordinary rescue. This dog carried a secret powerful enough to destroy everything, and that night Daniel had just become part of it. Before we start, make sure to hit like, share, and subscribe. And really, I'm curious, where are you watching from? Drop your country name in the comments. I love seeing how far our stories travel. The blizzard showed no mercy. Snow whipped across the highway in furious waves, burying every trace of tire marks behind Daniel's cruiser. The radio crackled faintly with static, a lonely hum in the endless storm. His heater barely fought against the cold creeping through the windows, and frost had begun to form along the edges of the glass. He'd been on patrol for 10 hours straight, responding to abandoned vehicle reports and stranded travelers, but this part of the road was different. Isolated, forgotten, a place even locals avoided after dark. Visibility was nearly zero. Every few seconds, Daniel leaned forward, squinting at the faint glow of his headlights cutting through the snow. His mind wandered. Memories of his old partner, a German shepherd named Max, who died saving a child during a flood 2 years ago. Since then, he'd worked alone, telling himself he didn't need another partner. But tonight, that memory felt like a ghost riding beside him. He turned down a narrow service road leading toward the woods. The air seemed to grow heavier, colder. The wipers struggled against the freezing slush. Then movement. Just for a second, something crossed the beam of his headlights. It wasn't human, but not quite a shadow either. His pulse quickened. Daniel slowed the car, peering into the darkness. Snow drifts rippled like waves in the pale blue light. And there, barely visible, was something half buried in the snow. At first it looked like debris, but then it moved again, trembling. He pulled over, engine rumbling softly against the howl of the storm. "Dispatch, this is Unit 27. I might have a stranded animal near mile marker 32, he said into his radio. No response, just static. The storm had swallowed the signal. Daniel took a deep breath, grabbed his flashlight, and stepped out. The wind hit him like knives, the cold biting into his bones. Ahead through the swirling snow lay the faint outline of a cage, and something alive fighting to breathe. Daniel trudged through the snow, boots sinking deep into the frozen earth with every step. His flashlight beam cut through the storm, trembling in his gloved hand. The closer he got, the clearer the shape became. A large metal cage half buried under layers of ice. Snow had gathered on its bars like frost on old bones. And inside, barely moving, was a German shepherd. The dog's fur was matted with snow and streaked with something darker. Blood. Its breathing was shallow, each rise of its chest weaker than the last. Daniel's heart clenched. He knelt beside the cage, brushing off the frost with shaking hands. Hey, easy boy," he murmured, his voice gentle but strained against the wind. The shepherd's eyes flickered open, amber, piercing, filled with both pain and defiance. For a moment, their gazes locked, and Daniel felt an inexplicable pull, like the animal recognized him. The cage door was twisted and bent, as if someone had tried to rip it open from the inside. Beside it lay broken chains and a blood-stained piece of fabric, a torn patch of what looked like a uniform. Daniel's brows furrowed. This wasn't a lost pet. Someone had kept this dog here deliberately, and left him to die. He reached out carefully, fingers brushing against the shepherd's fur. The dog flinched, letting out a low, guttural growl, but there was no strength behind it. "It's okay," Daniel whispered. "I'm not gonna hurt you." The shepherd's eyes softened slightly, though its body trembled uncontrollably. Daniel shrugged off his heavy coat and wrapped it around the animal, shielding it from the wind. He looked around. No footprints, no tire tracks. Whoever did this was long gone. The snow had buried their trail. Daniel tried his radio again, but the blizzard swallowed the signal completely. He was alone out here, with a dying dog and too many unanswered questions. He examined the collar around the shepherd's neck. It was thick, reinforced, but the name tag was missing. Only a metal chip embedded inside marked with faint numbers. Daniel couldn't make sense of it. But one thing was certain. This dog hadn't wandered out here by accident. Someone wanted it gone, and Daniel wasn't about to let that happen. Daniel's breath came out in sharp bursts, fogging the icy air as he knelt beside the cage. The German shepherd's body trembled violently beneath his coat, every breath a struggle against the cold. "Hang in there, boy," Daniel whispered, glancing back at his patrol car's distant headlights glowing faintly through the storm. The snow was falling harder now, coating everything in white silence. He had to move fast. With a grunt, he grabbed the bent metal latch and pulled. It didn't budge. The cage door was frozen solid. Daniel kicked at the base, then pried at the hinges with his flashlight. The steel groaned, but the storm's roar drowned out the sound. Come on, he muttered, his fingers numb and bleeding. Finally, with a sharp snap, the hinge gave way and the door flung open. The dog flinched, whimpering softly, too weak to stand. Daniel slid his arms under the shepherd's limp body. The dog was heavier than he expected, its fur soaked and freezing. As he lifted him, a low moan escaped the animal's throat, a sound of pain that pierced Daniel's heart. "You're gonna be okay," he said, his voice cracking. "I've got you." He wrapped the coat tighter and began the slow, grueling trek back toward the car. The snow came up to his knees, and every gust threatened to knock him off balance. Behind him, the broken cage creaked in the wind, a lonely reminder of what the dog had endured. Daniel's radio buzzed faintly, a garbled voice barely audible. "Unit 27, copy?" He tried to respond, but the storm swallowed his words. He pressed forward, teeth clenched, his boots slipping on the icy ground. Finally, he reached the cruiser. He opened the back door and carefully laid the shepherd across the seat, wrapping him in an emergency blanket from the trunk. The dog's breathing was shallow, but his eyes followed Daniel's movements, trusting him completely now. Daniel climbed into the driver's seat, cranked up the heater, and grabbed the radio again. "Dispatch, this is Officer Daniel Reed. I need immediate veterinary assistance. Injured K9 found near mile 32. Static answered him. He slammed the receiver down. No backup, no signal, just him, the storm, and a dying German shepherd he refused to give up on. The cruiser's engine roared to life, headlights cutting through the swirling wall of white. Daniel's fingers trembled as he shifted into gear, his breath fogging the inside of the windshield. The storm pounded relentlessly, wind howling like a living thing. He kept one hand on the wheel and the other on the blanket covering the German shepherd, feeling the faint rise and fall of its chest. "Stay with me, buddy," he murmured, glancing at the rearview mirror. The dog's amber eyes blinked weakly, reflecting the flickering dashboard light. The heater blasted full power, but it barely dented the freezing air. The tires struggled for traction as Daniel navigated the slick mountain road. The radio was still dead, just static and faint bursts of distorted sound. Outside, visibility dropped to almost nothing, but he couldn't stop now. He'd already decided no matter what it took, he'd get this dog to safety. As the minutes dragged by, Daniel talked to keep himself focused. "You remind me of someone," he said softly. "Had a partner once. Brave like you. Never backed down." His voice cracked, the memory of Max flashing in his mind, his old K9 partner who'd sacrificed himself to save a child. "Not losing another one," he whispered. The German shepherd stirred faintly, a low whimper escaping its throat. Daniel's eyes flicked to the mirror again. "That's it. Keep fighting." He pressed harder on the accelerator, the car fishtailing briefly before gripping again. Through the blur of snow, a faint orange glow appeared in the distance, the emergency lights of the town's small veterinary clinic. Relief surged through him. He grabbed the radio once more, shouting into it even though no one might hear. "This is Officer Daniel Reed, arriving with a critical animal injury." As the cruiser skidded into the parking lot, Daniel exhaled shakily. They'd made it. Barely, but they'd made it. And deep inside, he couldn't shake the feeling that this rescue was only the beginning. The clinic door burst open as Daniel rushed inside, cradling the limp German shepherd in his arms. The blast of warm air hit his frozen face, fogging his glasses and blurring his vision. "Emergency," he shouted. "I found him in the snow. He's losing blood fast." A middle-aged veterinarian hurried from the back, her scrubs wrinkled, eyes wide with alarm. "Set him here," she ordered, pointing to a stainless steel examination table. Daniel laid the dog down carefully, his coat still wrapped tight around the animal's body. The shepherd whimpered softly, legs twitching. The vet's assistant moved quickly, wiping away the snow and checking for vital signs. The vet's expression hardened as she examined the wounds. "These cuts aren't from an accident," she murmured. "They're precise, surgical." She turned the dog's body slightly, revealing a long, healed incision along his abdomen. Too clean, too deliberate. Daniel frowned. "You mean someone did this intentionally?" She didn't answer, just continued working. Within minutes, she had an IV line running, oxygen tube attached, and a heart monitor beeping faintly. The dog's pulse was weak but steady. The vet scanned a small device over the shepherd's neck, searching for a microchip. The scanner beeped and then froze. She frowned, scanning again. "That's odd," she said. "The chip is there, but the data's been erased." Daniel blinked. "Erased? You mean someone wiped it?" She nodded slowly, concern deepening in her voice. "It's not common. You'd need specialized equipment to clear an animal's identity data. This dog, it's been deliberately hidden." She looked up at him. "Do you have any idea where he came from?" Daniel shook his head. "Found him locked in a cage off Route 32, no footprints, no tracks. Just him and a blood trail." The vet sighed, gently stroking the shepherd's ear. "Whatever he's been through, it wasn't just abuse. Someone wanted him gone." Daniel stood silent, watching the dog's chest rise and fall. For a brief moment, the shepherd's eyes fluttered open and met his again. There was something hauntingly human in that look, like a plea, a memory, or maybe a warning. The monitor beeped steadily. The worst had passed. But Daniel couldn't shake the feeling that this night's rescue was just the first layer of something far darker. The storm had finally eased outside, but inside the small clinic the tension only grew thicker. Daniel sat in the corner of the examination room, his jacket soaked and hands trembling as he watched the vet work. The German shepherd lay motionless under a heat lamp, wrapped in fresh bandages. Steam rose from his fur as the snow melted away, revealing more than just wounds. It revealed secrets. "Look at this," the vet murmured, carefully parting the dog's fur near its shoulder. Beneath the skin was a faint, almost invisible scar, running in a perfect circle. "That's not from a fight or an accident," she said, her brows furrowing. "That's surgical, done with precision tools." Daniel leaned closer. "You think he was experimented on?" The vet didn't answer right away. She turned off the light, then shone a UV lamp across the dog's body. Faint lines, almost like markings, appeared along its ribs and spine. They weren't tattoos, but they looked deliberate, symmetrical. "These aren't natural," she whispered. "Someone wanted to track or modify this animal." Daniel's mind raced. The erased chip? The surgical scars? The cage? He clenched his fists. This wasn't just cruelty. Someone was trying to hide what they did. The vet nodded gravely, and they didn't want anyone to find him alive. Outside, the wind howled again, rattling the clinic windows. The shepherd stirred faintly, letting out a soft growl that quickly turned into a whimper. Daniel stepped closer, gently placing his hand on the dog's paw. "You're safe now," he said quietly. But even as he said it, his gut told him otherwise. Safe was the last thing this animal was. Whoever had done this wasn't finished, and if they knew the dog had survived, they'd come looking. And when they did, they'd find Daniel waiting. The clinic had fallen into uneasy silence. Hours passed, the storm outside fading into a cold, ghostly calm. Daniel sat in the hallway, coffee gone cold in his hand, eyes fixed on the dimly lit recovery room where the German shepherd rested. The rhythmic beep of the heart monitor was the only sound that reminded him the dog was still alive. The vet had gone home to rest, leaving Daniel on watch. He'd promised to stay until morning, but something in his gut refused to let him relax. The erased microchip, the surgical scars, none of it felt random. Every instinct told him this was bigger than animal cruelty. This was deliberate, controlled. Then, sometime after midnight, a faint noise broke through the quiet. A metallic click from the back door. Daniel froze. Another sound followed, the slow creak of hinges. His hand instinctively went to his holster. "Who's there?" he called out, voice firm but low. No answer. He moved down the hallway, flashlight in one hand, weapon drawn. The emergency lights flickered as a gust of cold air swept through the corridor. The back door was ajar, snow blowing in from the outside, Footprints, fresh ones, led straight into the clinic. Daniel's pulse quickened. He followed the trail cautiously, every nerve alert. Then he heard it, a faint shuffle near the recovery room. He turned the corner, light cutting across the floor just in time to see a shadowed figure leaning over the shepherd's table. "Freeze," Daniel barked. The intruder spun around, eyes hidden behind a black mask. For a split second they locked eyes, and then the figure bolted. Daniel lunged forward, but the intruder slipped through the rear exit, vanishing into the snow. Daniel rushed back to the recovery room. The dog was trembling, awake now, teeth bared in fear. A cabinet lay open, files missing. Whoever that was hadn't come to hurt the dog. They'd come to erase whatever evidence still remained. And now, Daniel knew, someone out there would do anything to keep this secret buried. Morning came, cold and quiet, the storm now nothing more than a memory, but the unease from the night before clung to the air like frost. Daniel stood outside the clinic, scanning the snow-covered lot where the intruder had vanished hours ago. The wind had erased most of the tracks, but one thing was clear. The break-in wasn't random. Whoever came here knew exactly what they were looking for. He climbed into his cruiser, mind racing. The stolen files, the erased chip, the scars. None of it added up. He needed answers, and the only lead he had was the spot where he'd first found the dog. With determination in his eyes, he drove, back into the mountains, headlights slicing through the lingering fog. The cage was still there, half buried under new snow, twisted and silent. Daniel knelt beside it, brushing the ice away. This time, he searched every inch. Bolts, broken hinges, rusted metal, all ordinary. But then something caught his eye, a small flat tag wedged beneath the frozen mud. He pried it out carefully, wiping it clean. It was a thin metal plate, about the size of a coin, stamped with a strange series of numbers and one haunting word: Project Eden. Daniel frowned, turning it over in his glove. The letters were burned in, not engraved, as if someone wanted it to last forever. Project Eden, he murmured. It didn't sound like a dog's name. It sounded like a code name. A program. A chill crawled down his spine. He took a photo of it with his phone and pocketed the tag. As he stood, the wind picked up, whispering through the pines like distant voices. Something about this place felt wrong, like it had witnessed too much. Back in his cruiser, Daniel radioed dispatch again. "This is Officer Reed. I need any records connected to the term Project Eden, possibly linked to animal testing or research labs." But the reply that came through wasn't what he expected. "Negative, officer. No public or private records under that name. It's classified." Daniel sat back, the reality sinking in. Classified. That meant government-level secrecy. The wounded shepherd in his care wasn't just an abused animal. He was evidence, living proof of something the world wasn't meant to see. Daniel couldn't shake the name, Project Eden. It echoed in his mind as he drove through the snow-dusted streets toward the outskirts of town. Someone out there knew what that meant, and he intended to find them. His search led him to an old industrial district, a maze of abandoned factories and rusting storage hangars. The vet had mentioned a retired biologist who once worked for a private defense contractor in the area. Maybe he'd know something. The house stood alone at the end of a narrow road, its windows fogged and curtains drawn. Daniel knocked firmly. After a pause, the door creaked open, revealing a frail man with gray hair and wary eyes. "Dr. Harlan Pierce?" Daniel asked. The man hesitated before nodding. "I'm not doing interviews," Pierce muttered, trying to close the door. Daniel wedged his boot against it. "This isn't about an interview. I found a German shepherd last night, left for dead. He had surgical scars, an erased chip, and this." He pulled the metal tag from his pocket and placed it in Pierce's trembling hand. The old scientist froze. His face went pale. "Where did you get this?" "In the snow," Daniel said. "You know what it means, don't you?" Pierce's voice cracked. "You shouldn't have come here." He glanced nervously toward the window. Project Eden was never supposed to exist. It was a classified experiment, military intelligence. They were creating enhanced rescue units, dogs engineered with heightened perception, memory, even emotional recognition. But it went wrong. Daniel frowned. What do you mean wrong? Pierce swallowed hard. They became too intelligent. They began disobeying commands, showing independence. The higher-ups called it a failure. They shut it down. Every test subject was ordered to be terminated. Daniel's stomach twisted. And the one I found, he escaped. Pierce nodded slowly, fear flickering in his eyes. If he's still alive, they'll come for him. They can't risk exposure. He pressed the tag back into Daniel's hand. Forget you ever saw it, officer, for your sake and his. But as Daniel stepped back into the cold night, one thing was clear. He couldn't walk away now. Whatever Project Eden was, it wasn't over yet. By the time Daniel returned to the clinic, dawn had broken, a pale, icy light spilling through the frosted windows. The storm had passed, leaving behind a stillness that felt almost unnatural. He stepped quietly into the recovery room, half expecting the shepherd to still be asleep. But what he saw stopped him cold. The dog was awake, standing. His body was still weak, but his posture was alert, his eyes sharp. The amber glow in them wasn't just awareness, it was intelligence. The heart monitor had been disconnected, the IV pulled free, yet the dog seemed calm, composed. When Daniel entered, those eyes followed him, not with fear, but recognition. Hey, easy there, Daniel said softly, raising his hands. The shepherd didn't growl, didn't back away. Instead, he tilted his head slightly, as if analyzing Daniel's tone, his stance, his intent. It was unsettling, like the dog could read him. Daniel took a cautious step closer. You're tougher than you look, he murmured, trying to mask the unease building in his chest. The shepherd blinked slowly, then looked toward the window, ears twitching at distant sounds only he could hear. A low rumble vibrated in his throat, not a growl, but a warning. Moments later, Daniel heard it too, a faint hum outside, like an engine idling somewhere close. He moved to the window and saw a dark SUV parked down the street, its windows tinted, engine running. His gut twisted. Someone was watching the clinic. He turned back to the shepherd, who was still staring in the same direction, muscles tense, tail stiff. It was as if the dog knew they were being observed. Daniel knelt beside him, running a hand gently over his fur. You sense it too, don't you? The dog's eyes shifted back to him, steady, unwavering. Then, for the first time, he stepped forward and pressed his head lightly against Daniel's arm. A gesture of trust. Daniel exhaled slowly. Whatever. This animal was experiment, survivor, miracle. It didn't matter anymore. They were connected now, and deep down he knew. The people who created him were coming, and they wouldn't stop until they got him back. The snow outside glowed faintly under the pale morning sun as Daniel sat in his cruiser, phone pressed to his ear. He'd spent the last hour calling every contact he could trust, former officers, local vets, even an animal welfare agent. None of them had ever heard of Project Eden. The silence surrounding it was deafening. Back inside, the shepherd rested near the examination table, alert but calm. Daniel leaned against the counter, mind racing. He replayed Dr. Pierce's words again and again. They became too intelligent. The thought gnawed at him. What kind of experiment could make a dog think, truly think, like that? The vet returned mid-morning, surprised to find Daniel still there. You haven't left? She asked softly. Couldn't, he replied, eyes on the shepherd. He's not just another stray. There's something different about him. She hesitated, then lowered her voice. While you were gone, I ran a deeper scan on the tissue samples we took. She handed him a folder. This dog's DNA isn't standard. It's been altered. Daniel's brows furrowed. Altered how? His neural structure is enhanced, more developed than any canine I've seen. The patterns suggest advanced learning ability, emotional processing, even memory recall similar to humans. She met his gaze. Whoever created him wasn't trying to build a weapon. They were trying to build a being. Daniel's chest tightened. He looked at the shepherd now lying quietly, eyes half open but watchful. And they wanted him dead because he succeeded. The vet nodded grimly. If what you told me about that break-in is true, they're tracking him. You both need to disappear before they find you. Daniel crouched beside the shepherd, gently scratching behind his ear. Looks like we're both fugitives now, huh? He whispered. The dog's tail thumped faintly, eyes meeting his with quiet understanding. Outside, the low hum of the black SUV returned, closer this time. Daniel's pulse quickened. He glanced toward the window. The hunt had already begun. In that moment, one truth became clear. Project Eden wasn't just a secret experiment. It was a warning, and the only thing standing between the world and whatever it was meant to unleash was him and the dog who refused to die. The clinic lights flickered as Daniel stood by the window, staring at the dark SUV idling in the distance. The air outside was still, but inside tension gripped every corner. The shepherd lay near the door, his ears twitching, his gaze fixed on the same direction as Daniel's. Neither moved. Both knew they were being watched. Daniel's thoughts raced. He could call for backup, report everything, hand over the dog to the authorities. It would be the safest move, the logical one. But then he remembered the look in Dr. Pierce's eyes, the erased chip, the scars carved into the shepherd's body. This animal had already been used, betrayed, hunted. Turning him in would mean handing him back to the very people who had tried to destroy him. He crouched beside the dog, meeting those intelligent amber eyes. "They'll come for you," he murmured. "If I turn you in, they'll tear you apart trying to learn what makes you different. If I don't, they'll come after me too." The shepherd tilted his head slightly as if understanding. His nose brushed Daniel's wrist, a small silent gesture of trust. Daniel swallowed hard. "You didn't ask for any of this, did you?" he whispered. "All you did was survive." He glanced again through the blinds. The SUV's headlights flashed once, then turned off. Whoever they were patient, watching, waiting. Daniel took a deep breath, decision settling heavy in his chest. "All right, buddy," he said quietly. "We're not running, but we're not surrendering either." He grabbed his coat and reached for the car keys. The shepherd rose to his feet, steady now, ready. Outside, snow began to fall again, soft, steady, silent. It felt almost like the world holding its breath. Daniel knew the next choice would cost him everything. But for the first time in years, his heart felt clear. He wasn't protecting evidence anymore. He was protecting life. The night had fallen heavy and silent, blanketing the town in a cold stillness. Daniel drove with his headlights off, taking the back roads that wound through the forest. The German shepherd sat beside him in the passenger seat, alert, eyes scanning the darkness ahead. Every few seconds, Daniel checked the rearview mirror. 2 faint headlights followed at a distance. They had found them. He pressed harder on the gas. The tires skidded briefly on the icy road before gripping again. "Hold on, boy," he muttered. The dog's ears perked, sensing the urgency. Ahead, the trees thinned, revealing an old ranger station abandoned years ago. Daniel swerved into the clearing and killed the engine. The silence that followed was deafening. He stepped out, snow crunching under his boots, and motioned the shepherd to stay low. Moments later, the black SUV pulled in, its doors opening in perfect sync. 2 men in tactical coats stepped out, weapons glinting in the dim light. "Officer Reed," one of them called. "You have something that doesn't belong to you." Daniel raised his flashlight instead of his gun. "You mean someone," he said. "He's not your experiment anymore." The man smirked. "You have no idea what he is." "Maybe not," Daniel replied, "but I know what he isn't, a thing." The agents advanced. The shepherd growled low, a deep rumble that vibrated through the snow. One agent reached for his weapon, but before he could raise it, the dog lunged. Fast, precise, unstoppable. Daniel moved too, disarming the second man with a swift strike. Snow exploded around them as the short, violent struggle ended, with both agents subdued. Breathing hard, Daniel looked at the shepherd, whose fur bristled, eyes glowing with fierce determination. "Good boy," he whispered. Sirens echoed faintly in the distance. Backup he hadn't called. Someone else was coming. Daniel knew this wasn't over, but as he stood beside the dog in the quiet snow, he realized something certain. He would rather fight for this one life than live a lifetime obeying the wrong orders. Weeks passed since that night in the forest. The official report labeled it a security misunderstanding. The men who attacked him were never identified. Their SUV vanished, and Project Eden was quietly erased from every system Daniel tried to access. He was put on leave pending investigation, but he didn't care. He'd already made his choice. Now, standing on a snowy hillside overlooking the valley, Daniel watched as the German Shepherd, strong, healthy, and free, bounded through the snow like a creature reborn. The wind carried the dog's bark across the frozen field, sharp and full of life. Daniel smiled faintly, his breath forming white clouds in the cold air. "You made it, buddy," he whispered. The dog stopped, turning back toward him. For a moment, their eyes met, man and creature bound by something deeper than command or instinct. Daniel remembered the first time he'd seen him, half dead in the blizzard, and felt the same quiet awe now that he was seeing him alive, unbroken, unstoppable. A soft crunch of snow drew his attention. The vet approached, her scarf fluttering in the breeze. "He's healing faster than expected," she said. Whatever they did to him, it made him extraordinary. Daniel nodded, still watching the shepherd. "He always was," she smiled gently. "So what now?" He looked toward the horizon where the sun began to break through the clouds, painting the snow in gold. "Now he gets to live," Daniel said quietly. "No cages, no experiments, no orders. Just life." The shepherd ran back to him, pressing his head against Daniel's hand, tail wagging softly. Daniel knelt, pulling him close. "You're free now," he whispered. "Don't waste it." As the wind swept across the valley, Daniel stood beside his unlikely companion, two survivors of different worlds, bound by fate, redeemed by loyalty. And somewhere, deep in the snow-covered silence, Project Eden remained a buried secret, one the world would never know but one heart would never forget.